All right, guys, it's January 2nd, and we're headed out here to do a little bit more inshore fishing. If you saw our last video, we talked a lot about how to catch these fish in the winter, in the cold, stuff like that. And we're gonna be doing some more stuff today. It's actually a little bit warmer today than it was the last time we shot. We got northeast wind. It's January 2nd. I mean, you know, these fish are really kind of at this point settled into the creeks. We're gonna go out here and throw some plugs, throw some jigs, and see if we can show you guys a little bit of a how-to on how to catch more trout and redfish in Crystal River. Water's 65. Feel like it should be some pretty good fishing today, and at least great light tackle fishing. You know, we haven't seen as many big redfish, big being over 25 inches, but this year we've had a phenomenal amount of 18 to 22 inch redfish, and which is fine. I mean, especially for our customers that want to keep fish and eat fish, those are great eating size fish. And you know, I'd rather have the numbers of fish than just have a handful of big ones around, which we've seen in, you know, winters in the past. But we've got a lower tide, it's going out, it's gonna get pretty dry today. And we're in the Salt River 23, should be a good time. And should be really informative and helpful, because over the next 2 weeks, it's supposed to get very cold, and the whole fishing is going to be the answer, along with catching them in the river. So hopefully everything will work out for us, and you guys get to see some great fishing on light tackle. Our lures of choice are probably gonna be small soft plastic jigs, mirror lure Little John's on light jig heads, as well as the Rip and Slash 70. That's in the color 12. It's a gold side, black back, orange belly. That's kind of my favorite for conditions like this. It is bright, it's very sunny today, high pressure, which, I mean, we get a ton of it in the winter, and people always want to talk about, oh, the fish don't bite that well on high pressure. You know, I don't necessarily buy into that. I will say, I mean, you can have some phenomenal fishing on a low pressure day, but you don't get very many of those this time of year. You're gonna get one right on the day that the cold front is coming. And then typically, you know, for the 5 or 6 days following a cold front, the pressure's gonna be pretty high. And if you're a guy like me that's charter fishing and out here every day, you gotta figure out how to catch them in high pressure. That being said, you know, I feel like we should see some pretty good fishing today. You know, it is supposed to be cold, and you know, lures like that, which that one is very chewed up, but we're gonna be switching that jig out. But you know, just little soft plastic jigs, again, like we talked about in the video last week, it's not very complicated. You know, we're gonna keep this simple, show you guys how to do some really easy little things, and hopefully catch a lot of fish. Love to see some pompanos today. That would kind of be like a big thing for me. You know, there's been a few around, it's been a little bit challenging to catch them, but if we can get on a handful of pompano, I would really be excited about that for sure. So we just got to the first spot, and it's, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily call it a hole. This one we call more of a depression, but we're up in this creek system, and there's a creek that dumps out right here, and there's maybe a 100-yard long by 100-yard wide little spot. Everything around it's about 5 inches deep, and right here it's anywhere from 1.5 feet to 2 foot deep. As the tide gets lower, these fish fall out of the creek and drop off into this hole. We're throwing some Little Johns, and we're gonna see if we can catch us a couple of redfish. I'm sure if we threw shrimp, they'd probably get a lot more excited, but we're gonna see if we can convince a good one to eat a soft plastic here, start our day. And our next couple areas we're gonna be fishing are gonna be looking for trout, and we'll talk about a little bit more of that. But typically when we're redfish fishing in a hole, look for the mullet. I mean, and I know it's so old school and cliche to say, oh yeah, the redfish are with the mullet, but they are. I mean, it's just what's gonna happen. You know, predominantly, if you're in a bigger hole like this, you see mullet jumping in one corner, that's where your redfish are gonna be. So we just moved over here to our second spot. That first one, the tide wasn't really quite low enough to get these fish to fall off into the hole yet. They were kind of still up the creek, and of course we couldn't get to them where they were. But that being said, this second little hole is kind of almost shaped like a banana, right? You could see it up along the bank. It's not super deep. We're sitting in about 1.5 feet of water, and over there it's about 2.5 feet deep. And we're bouncing these Little Johns on the bottom. I'm throwing a new penny, and you know, we should get some bites. You know, water's 64 degrees, it's flowing out of here pretty quick, and hopefully here in the next few minutes we'll get a bite out of a fish. And right now we're just trying to locate them. You know, if there's 10 redfish sitting in a hole, this hole's about 80 foot long, I mean, they're normally gonna be sitting together. That being said, you gotta kind of try to figure them out. sitting there casting in the same spot is not always the answer. You know, if you're gonna fish a shrimp, throw it out there, let it sit on the bottom. The fish will probably find it eventually, but when you're throwing artificials to these fish, you gotta kind of, you know, almost scan around with your bait. Start on one end and kind of methodically work toward the other. And we'll find them here in a second, I'm sure. First cast, throwing that little John that I was actually showing earlier that I rigged up. And got a beautiful little 18, 19 inch redfish. You can see right down the hatch, beautiful fish. And like I said, this is what we're seeing a lot of this time of year, 18, 19, 20, 22 inch fish. So when you're measuring a redfish, a trout, a snook, you have to pinch the tail. And if you look at him right there, that means you're gonna pinch that tail down right at 0. And you can look, he's right there at 19 inches. So that's how you would legally measure that fish. And we're gonna let him go, but that would be a lower slot keeper fish. Redfish are 18 and 27 inches. So just worked over a little bit. I made 3 casts in this right end of the hole and worked over to the left a little bit, and I had a bite, missed him, and then I let it sit there for a couple of seconds, twitched it, and whether it was the same fish or another fish, he came up and ate it. And this is actually a pretty decent one. But kind of like we talked about last week, I'm fishing light tackle. I'm fishing Fitzgerald medium light. This is the Aquafin series rod. I'm fishing a Vanford 2000, and I've got 5-pound braid on here. So pulling on these fish hard is not something we're gonna be doing, but if he'll come out from under the boat right there, you'll get a pretty good chance to see him. And he's got that little John right there, actually under his mouth. So that fish actually missed it twice. And if you look at where that jig is, it's right there on the bottom of his lip. So it probably landed on the bottom. He went down on it and missed it, and I twitched it and caught him right there. And you know, that's why we fish a lot of single hooks. We're not trying to hurt these fish. You know, if we were fishing treble hooks, could have got caught in the side of the face. I do enjoy fishing plugs, but you know, it is nicer if you can try not to snag fish that you're not gonna keep. But that's a pretty fish, probably right there around 21 inches or so. And I'm going to let him go. That was perfect. Owen's got a big one. And I've been doing all the talking, but this is Owen Dunsmore. He's the newest captain in our company, and he's actually been doing really, really good. He's had some awesome catches of trout and redfish here the past couple weeks. And he's got a really good one on right now. That is a nice one. There you go. So that would be an overslot redfish, and Owen just caught that one. You can see he's throwing a chartreuse jig head. I'm throwing an unpainted one, but that's a phenomenal fish right there. And that would be a really nice fish for this time of year. Probably just over slot. We'll measure him, take a look. He's got that jig right there in the corner of his jaw, popped right out, nice and easy. Again, kind of like we talked about with that last fish, we said that fish was probably just a touch oversized and tail pinched. He's 27.5. So that's a beautiful fish. I'll let Owen hold him up since it's his. So we kind of worked around in this hole a little bit with our jigs. We could pretty much fish the whole thing from where the boat's positioned, and we found a few fish. I caught, you know, about a 19 incher, caught about a 21 incher. Owen threw right in there, kind of right in that back pocket of it. And he caught one that was 27.5, really nice fish. And again, you know, kind of like we talked about, you know, we're seeing a lot of fish that are, you know, toward the smaller end of the slot, and that one was an over. Beautiful fish. And that would be a day maker this time of year. Whereas, you know, when we fish in September, October, November for the redfish in our area, I mean, we see a lot of overslot fish. But, you know, we worked around, found them, and caught 3 nice fish so far, and 1 little guy. But that's kind of exactly what you want to do. You got 2 guys working. He started on the left, I started on the right, and as soon as somebody hooks up, throw that other bait right in there, and you should get a double. Or we were really close to having a double. I released mine, and right as I released mine, he hooked his. Worked out perfect. So this setup that I'm throwing would kind of be, if you have light tackle, then this would be saltwater ultralight tackle. So I've got 5-pound braid, I tie a double line in it, and then I tied a 15-pound fluorocarbon. If there's snook around, I'll use 25, but you know, pretty much as cold as it is, there shouldn't be many snook around here. And it's a 7'2" aquafin and the medium light. But that Van for 2000 right there holds plenty of 5-pound braid, about 220 yards. And it allows me to make long casts, especially into the wind, which is like a big part of fishing in a hole, because you gotta approach it the only way you can. Some of these are, you know, you're sliding in from one side to the other, you can only get to a certain side of it. And you know, like right now, if I have to fish into the wind, I'm fine, I can do that. But predominantly it's pretty short casts. But that's kind of what we were talking about, and you know, it makes it a lot of fun, right? You know, this is the time of year when you can, you know, catch and release these fish and not worry about, quote, you know, hurting them or them being, quote, exhausted because there's so much dissolved oxygen in the water. But that's a big part of what we're doing. Light tackle, there's no reason to, you know, winch these fish to the boat. Oh, there's one right there. And if you look right there, you can see where that boil came up. He bit it 10 feet from the boat, 15 feet from the boat. So, cute little fish. Probably a 16, 17 incher. Throw that guy back and see if we can find his mama, big brother, daddy, somebody bigger. That's all we're really looking for. Got another bite right in that same spot. I mean, and these fish are kind of actually favoring the side of the hole that we're on, which a lot of times you would think, hey, you know, and we just ran into this hole. You know, you can't really troll a motor in 4 inches of water, which is what we have behind the boat. But we ran into this hole and came off just like that. And these fish are not sitting on the far edge. They're sitting right here pretty close to us. And you know, that's something that you always have to think about. You know, you always find yourself, you pull into a spot and you try to make a long cast. And you can honestly neglect fish in the water that's 15, 20, 30 feet from the boat. You know, especially with modern spinning tackle, I mean, we could throw a long ways. I could throw this little jig with the wind 75, 80, 90 feet. And, you know, you got to remember, there can be fish right in front of you, almost under your feet. So all morning we've been throwing soft plastics on jig heads, but if you want an opportunity to catch what we would call a bonus fish, you know, trout and redfish are the mainstay of the whole fishing, but we do have a lot of sheepshead, a lot of black drum. Both of those are gonna do way better on a shrimp on a jig head. And of course, you know, the cool thing these days is to come out here and throw artificials and all that. And it is great, it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy it. But at the same time, you know, if you're looking to catch a sheepshead, looking to catch a black drum, you're gonna need to throw a shrimp. And that's one thing to remember. I mean, we all come out here and throw jigs around and do stuff like we're doing today, but you're definitely not gonna see everything that a hole has to offer by throwing a soft plastic. You're not gonna get many bites out of sheepshead, and you're probably not gonna get a bite out of a black drum. But that's just something to kind of keep in mind as you're out here. So this is our third hole that we fished. We caught nice fish in 2 of the 3. First one, like I said earlier, wasn't quite low enough to have those fish in it yet. And we're gonna jump out of this creek system. We're gonna run out here, try to catch some speckled trout, see if we can find a few. And you know, again, we're probably gonna be throwing some pretty similar, probably really the same jigs. We're gonna throw the Little Johns on jig heads, may throw some plugs for the trout. You know, anything that sinks really slow is definitely a big part of the wintertime game for trout. But should be able to find a few. Water back here in the creeks is currently 61 degrees, which is a little cooler than we saw when we were idling out of the marina, which is right there at the river. But should be able to get a few bites, and hopefully you'll get to see some nice speckled trout caught. So we just came out here into this bay, kind of over here south of Sandy Hook, and we're looking for some speckled trout. And really, for me, most of the time, trout fishing is all just about transitions. Transition being where the depth changes. And that transition can occur from 6 to 7 feet of water, just the same way it can occur from what we're doing right here. it's going from 1.5 feet to about 2.5, 3 foot deep. We're kind of working along the edge of this big trough out here in the middle of this bay, and similar to what we talked about with the redfish, we're gonna work this whole area and see if we can find us a group of fish. If you find one, stop. Oh, Owen's got one right there. Oh, had one right there. So trout fishing for me most of the time is all about transitions. And transition is where the water changes in depth, right? So right here where we're sitting, we're kind of on the edge of a trough. Everything out to our left is 5 foot deep. Everything up to our right is coming up to about 1 foot deep. And we're sitting here right along the edge of this trough. And we just found a couple of fish. And that's actually a pretty nice one right there. That would be a nice wintertime speckled trout. Probably a 17, 18-inch fish. That's the same jig that you just watched us catch those redfish on earlier. And, you know, we're trying to really just locate them, put the power poles down. You know, if you're in your little John boat, put your anchor in the water. You know, whatever you got to do to stop your boat so you don't drift over them, that's exactly what you want to do. Owen's got one right there. That's a pretty nice one. And I'm gonna throw right in there behind him. And a lot of times what you wanna do, just let that jig hit the bottom, jig it up, and that bite's gonna come on the pause. So I'll twitch my rod tip up, let it sit. That's a really nice fish Owen's got right there. It's the same thing we talked about with the redfish. You know, we're in a big open trough area out here where it's a little bit deeper in the middle of this bay, but once you find them, stop the boat, they're gonna be right there. Keep working right around that same little area. And I mean, Owen just caught that nice one. I threw right in behind where that one was, caught this one, you know, and this one's probably 15.5, 16 inches. You know, Owen's is probably about 20 inches. So, but it's fun to get them where you can find them and you can really kind of refine it down. You know, you can get better at throwing a jig, stuff like that. And, you know, couple of delicious fish right here. If you kind of look out in front of us, and we'll show it in a second, you can see kind of the edge where the deep water comes up into the shallow. And you're gonna take that jig, throw it out there. And I always tend to hold my rod tip up with a jig. So I'm gonna jig it up and I just hold it still. I actually had one bite it right there. But when I jig it up and hold it still, I can feel on the fall as that fish bites it. And that's exactly what I'm looking for. You don't want to set the hook crazy hard with these fish. They do have a softer mouth, and if you do miss them, you don't want to yank the jig out of the zone. That's another big piece of it. You know, a lot of times there's multiple fish in here, and you know, if you're able to, you know, miss one and just kind of maybe barely pull it a little bit, pull it a couple of feet, you can get a second bite. There's one right there. Right as that jig is falling, you're gonna feel kind of a, and it's not gonna be a really hard bite on these little jigs. That's a nice 16-inch trout, slot fish, meaning he's between 15 and 19 inches. That's pretty much all we keep. We're not out here to keep the big ones. Those are the spawners that we need to make more of them, but we are gonna keep a few of these because they are delicious fish. So again, we've kind of moved around a little bit, right around the edge of this hole, just trying to really, I'm throwing up toward the shallow edge and just working my way down. And it's kind of hard to see in here, but this water's just a little bit dirty. And there's a bunch of fish in here, really mixed size. We've caught them from 5 inches to 20 inches. But you know, you take that jig, and I'm throwing it right over there toward that edge, let it sink for a few seconds. And really, I'm trying to make contact with the bottom after every twitch. So I'm gonna twitch it up off the bottom about 15 inches or a foot, let it fall back. And that bite is gonna occur on the fall. But it wasn't exactly a great cast there. I didn't make it all the way up to, really I'm trying to throw to about 1.5 feet water, and I'm working it down to about 5 feet. But you know, that's just kind of it. Figure out where they're at, and try to stay with them. If you have 2 guys fishing, it definitely will help you stay with the fish. You know, you can kind of start in different areas and kind of meet in the middle, for lack of better words. Just moved over to another little area, and kind of this spot, different than the last one. Last time we were talking about kind of fishing like a sandy drop off. This spot has a couple of really hard rock walls along the edge of this trough that we're in. So we're in about 3.5 foot of water. Right out here in front of us is a couple of rock humps. They come up pretty shallow. So like right up on the top's like 6 inches. We're gonna kind of work our jigs down the edge of them. Try not to get hung on the bottom, of course, and see if we can get a few bites. But again, we're in another creek mouth, kind of just into the east a little bit, on the south side of Sandy Hook, and God willing, we can find a few fish right in here near these humps. The last spot, I think we probably caught 9 or 10 keepers, kept a few of them for dinner, and you know, that was some pretty decent fishing. We did end up catching some smaller fish, and the biggest one we caught was probably 20 inches. Oh, there's one right there while I'm trying to put the power poles down. Perfect. That couldn't have worked out any better. The only problem is he's about as big as your pinky finger. There he goes. But in a perfect world, anytime that you're fishing a spot, try to have the wind at your back. That'll always make your life a little bit easier. On this spot, we kind of had to loop around the fish. And that's actually a little bit better one right there. Maybe not much, but a little bit. The one I just lost was like 8 inches long. And that one's about 10 inches. They are cold. That's a good one. So that would be a nice overslot trout. And you can see he's got that jig pretty good right there in his mouth. But you know, when they get to be this big, we definitely want to let them go. And it's a beautiful fish. That fish is probably 20, 21 inches. And we don't eat fish this big, but well, there he goes. Pretty quick fight. He hit it really close to the boat. And that's one of the nice parts about this, is you can get these fish, you know, if you can get set up right on them like we are right now, we just kind of slid around to the upwind side of the hole so that we can, you know, cast with the wind and have it easy on us. That's a beautiful part about this, is, you know, these fish are right here. They can't get out of here. They're not going to swim across that wall that we just had to sneak over top of to get in here. Hopefully there'll be a few more of those in here. So you can kind of see it if you look right out here. You can kind of see the transition. We're in this hole right here. You can kind of see where it gets shallow over there. You got that little light chop on the water. That's where it's coming up to about 6 or 8 inches deep. And we're throwing right toward that edge and working it back. And a whole bunch of these guys in there. About a 17-inch fish. It'd be perfect. It's probably about an 18, 19-inch fish right there. And we slid out to another little hole, kind of worked our way back in. Now we're working our way back out. And that's a beautiful fish. Really glad to have a bunch of those around this year. We've had some really nice trout as far as what we've seen in the past. You know, some years when you get to the winter time and the fish all kind of push in, it seems like maybe more of the little fish push in. This year we've had a lot of nice fish pushing in toward the creeks. And that's something that always makes it a good time. You know, you can only catch so many redfish, but it's definitely a good time when the trout fishing gets good, and you get some nice fish. You know, you can kind of do what we're doing today. We're working around. You know, we haven't really fished a lot of area, but you know, we're just going hole to hole, and it's working out really well for us, catching some nice fish. That'll probably be our last one right there. It's another nice fish. We probably caught close to 20 keeper trout this morning, along with our redfish. There'll be plenty of fish out here when you get out here to do it yourself. It's a good time. So this morning we had a pretty traditional wintertime weather setup, right? So we had about 49 degrees at daylight. We left the dock at 8 o'clock and it's 1 o'clock now. We're headed in. We fished the falling tide all morning. If you look around right now, you can see it's pretty low. And but we managed to catch 5 nice redfish. We caught probably about 20 trout. We had some really good fishing, a lot of short trout, fished a bunch of different holes, and you know, kind of trying to showcase, you know, how you can find your own fish and what it takes to find them. I mean, you know, it's one thing to watch somebody like me or somebody, you know, one of the big names in this business out here just catching fish, but learning how to find these fish on your own is definitely the biggest puzzle, and it's not as hard as you would think. You know, we saw some guys out there in little John boats with little tiller handle outboard engines bumping around, getting into some of the holes, you know, so it's something you can do in a lot of different boats. I'm very blessed to get to drive this Salt River 23. It's a phenomenal boat for the wintertime fishery. But you know, we caught everything today on soft plastics, on jig heads, a handful of fish on rip and slashes. And, you know, just kind of shows that, you know, hey, if you want to come out here and catch some fish, 1 pack of soft plastics, a couple of jig heads, and you can be all set. But we did not catch any of the sheep's head and black drum. We would have needed some shrimp for. But do yourself a favor, get out on the water, enjoy the winter fishery. It's a lot of fun, and it's not hard to do. So we decided to keep a few speckled trout, and Owen and I are each going to take a couple home, but we're using the Mercer 7-inch narrow fillet knife, and these things are actually really awesome. You can see it's super flexible, which is perfect for these trout. You know, there's a lot of different ways to do this, but I cut down right behind the head and go ahead and pull the guts out, which pulls that swim bladder out, because that swim bladder right there is hard to cut through. And then follow it right down, flip it over, take it right off the skin just like that. And then I cut the rib cage out like so. And that's ready to go. So one of the best parts about fishing with us at a shrimp landing is you can come in and get your fish turned into tacos. And we took a few of those speckled trout, turned them into blackened fish tacos, and they are phenomenal. And don't forget the Bayou sauce. How are they, Owen?
Right on.
Goodness gracious, you did a messy job with that thing.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, my gosh.
I
But
was hungry.
they are awesome. Great way to utilize a few really good eating fish.